You're watching Life TV. My name is Brendan Malone, and if you're tuning into this video, it means that you've probably already watched that episode of Philosophy Time, the show that's hosted by James Franco and Elliot Michelson, where they have interviewed Professor Elizabeth Harman from Princeton University about abortion. One of the big themes through this video, it's only about 5 minutes long, I'll post a link below if you haven't seen it. She says that basically the fact that you were killed by an abortion, if you're an unborn child and you're killed by an abortion, that proves that you had no moral status, because you obviously have no future if you're dead, and you don't have moral status unless you have a future. Now obviously that in itself is an illogical proposition, it's circular reasoning, but she then tries to claim that that's not what her position is, but then after saying that that's not what her position is, she then goes on to explicitly state the following. You had moral status, but if your mother had chosen to abort you, then that wouldn't have been the case. So in other words, aborting you shows that you had no moral status. That's exactly what she's trying to argue here. That abortion makes itself moral. By committing the act, you are making this thing morally okay. It's circular, it's absurd reasoning. At another point she says, you have moral status, but you don't count morally. No, if you have moral status, then you definitely do count morally. A potato has no moral status. That's why it's perfectly okay to rip a living potato from the ground, chop it up, cook it in oil, and eat it. But a child does have moral status, and it is not okay to kill a living child and cook them in oil and then eat them. The whole point is, if you have moral status, you are entitled to basic fundamental moral respects, basic fundamental treatment. We are owed, in fact you are owed certain things from the rest of the community. The fundamental heart of what she's trying to argue here is that your future is what gives you your moral status, and if you have a future, you have moral status. And James Franco rightly points out the glaring error in this proposition when he asks her, can't we only know this in hindsight? In other words, what he's asking her here is, how can you possibly know whether someone has a future or not? And he's right. You can only know the lifespan that someone is going to have by looking back on their life, not by looking forward and trying to predict that. You see, she then tries to make convoluted arguments to get out of this, but the simple fact remains that an abortionist can't look at an unborn human being growing in a womb and say, yeah, that one there definitely has no moral status, it's okay to abort it, because I can tell it doesn't have a future. That's not how this works. Despite the fact that she tries to claim again that if you were aborted, that shows you had no moral status because you had no future, but if your mother had chosen to keep you, then because you had a future, that would mean that you do have moral status. That's not how this works at all. The point is this: you had a future until we destroyed it. If you are living and growing and developing in a womb, your future is unfolding as you progress. And if we kill you, we are the ones who have destroyed your future. You had a future. It was taken from you. Honestly, what she is saying is so illogical and contradictory. I was just waiting for someone to step into the frame and start saying, I do declare, we have ourselves an imposter here at Princeton University. This here woman is masquerading as a member of the faculty. Because what she is saying is just so illogical and contradictory and absurd. I've watched this video approximately 15 times. I've stopped, I've paused it, I've taken notes, and I still cannot find a coherent, non-contradictory and logical proposition being put forward here. It's just crazy. It's just insane. And she's a professor.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.